Good afternoon. This is lesson 6, and we're going to solve inequalities with negative coefficients. This is on page 11. So let's get started. We solve inequalities just like we solve equations. However, when we're given a negative coefficient, which means a number that is multiplying the variable, we must switch the direction of the inequality sign in the solution in order to make the solution true. In other words, if we multiply or divide by a negative when solving, we need to change the direction of the inequality sign in the answer. It is important to check the solution using the original inequality and the sign that's given. So let's see what this looks like. Before we begin, let's make sure that you have a negative in front of this 5. I tried to correct it, and I believe I've sent the corrected copy, but I want to make sure that you have that. So in order to solve this, we would build our wall, and negative 5 is multiplying x, so we would do the opposite. We would divide by negative 5 on both sides. And if you recall, on our right side, if I have a positive divided by a negative, I'm going to get a negative answer. But since you have a calculator, I would use it. So this is going to be negative 4. Now here's where the change occurs. We're going to drop down the x, but because we divided by a negative, I have to switch this inequality sign. So instead of being less than, it's greater than. And so let's go ahead and check a number that's greater than negative 4 and see why this will work. So in order to do a check, I go back to the original inequality. So I was given negative 5x, and it said that is less than 20. So that's the original. So now I'm going to replace my x. I'm going to substitute, it's called substitution, with a number that's greater than negative 4. So that would be negative 3. Or I could choose a positive number. It's completely up to you. Any number that's larger than negative 4. And I have to multiply that by negative 5. And when I get done, my solution should be less than 20. So if I multiply negative 5 by negative 3, I'm going to get positive 15. And that is indeed less than 20. So when I used a number that was greater than negative 4, my solution, when I substitute it, was correct. So if we would have solved this and not switched the sign, we would have chosen a number that would have been smaller than negative 4. So let's see what happens. This is just a what if. What would have happened had we checked our solution and it would have been a number that's less than negative 4. So I'm going to start with the original inequality again. I'm going to say negative 5. And this time I'm going to use negative 6 because that's less than negative 4. So I'm going to try this. And the original inequality says that my solution should be less than 20. Remember, this is the original inequality. And negative 5 times negative 6 would be positive 30. And this is not true. So mathematicians discovered that when this happens, when you have a negative, you're multiplying or dividing by a negative using inequalities, you have to switch the inequality sign in the solution, in the answer. So knowing that, let's go ahead and try a few more together. Our next inequality says that m divided by negative 3 is less than negative 8. So some number divided by negative 3 is less than negative 8. So let's start solving. We're going to go ahead and build our wall. And since I see that I'm dividing by negative 3, that's what I'm given, I have to do the opposite. I have to multiply by negative 3 on both sides. So these 3's cancel out, leaving my m, which is what I want on this side, and negative 8 times negative 3 would be a positive 24. And I'm going to look at the sign that I'm given. It's less than, so I have to switch it. So I now need to choose a number that's greater than 24 in order for this to be true. So let's go to the original inequality that they gave us. M was being divided, our number we don't know was being divided by -3, and that answer should be less than -8. If I did my solving correctly and I indeed switched my inequality, this should all work out. So I'm going to choose a number just to make it easier that's greater than 24, but it's also divisible by 3 because I'm going to have to divide it by 3. So I'm going to choose 27. So I'm going to replace the m with 27, and then I'm going to divide that by 3, and my answer should indeed be less than -8. So 27 divided by -3, again, it's a positive being divided by a negative. It's going to give me a negative answer. And 27 divided by 3 would be 9. So -9 is indeed less than -8. So this checks out. My solution is correct. If you're not sure, you can notice that -9 on the number line is furthest away from 0. So it is indeed smaller than -8. So let's try one more together, and then I'll have you try 4 on your own. I'm going to go ahead and use the distributive property in the traditional way. There is another way to solve this, but I want to go ahead and review those skills. So I'm going to take -5 times x. It's been a while maybe since we've done this. Okay, that's -5 multiplies everything inside the parentheses. So -5 times -3. We're going to look at that like it's a -3. Whoops, -3. And right now I'm just simplifying this side. I'm going to ignore the greater than or equal to 25 right now. So I have -5x, that's our first term, and then -5 times -3 is a positive 15, so I'm going to write that as plus 15. And now that I have this side simplified, I'm going to go ahead and write that this is greater than or equal to 25. So now I'm ready to solve. I'm going to start by undoing the constant. I'm going to subtract 15 on both sides. By subtracting or adding, that doesn't have any effect on the inequality sign. So I have left -5x on this side is greater than or equal to 10. And now here's the part that's going to change the order. Of my inequality sign, or the direction rather. I'm going to divide by -5 on both sides. And now I have x on this side, and over here I have -2, but this inequality sign, because I divided by a negative, must switch. So when I go to check my answer, I need a number that is less than or equal to -2. We don't want to use equal to, we want to check and make sure that the less than the inequality part actually is working. So we're going to choose a number that's smaller than -2. I'm just going to choose -3. But I have to put it in the original inequality. So our original inequality says that -5 is multiplying this quantity, x minus 3, and that that left side should be greater than or equal to 25. Notice when I do this, I'm using the original inequality sign. I choose my answer, the number that I'm going to use to check based on this inequality sign, but when I check, I use the original inequality that they gave me. So I mentioned that I was going to choose -3. So where the x is, I'm going to put -3. And so to that, I'm multiplying the quantity -3 minus 3, and that should be greater than or equal to 25. So at this point, because I have all numbers on the left-hand side, there's two ways to do this. I could go back and do the traditional way of using the distributive property, but much easier would be the fact that these are numbers right here. I don't have to really use the distributive property how I used it initially. So -3 minus 3 is going to give me a -6. And again, you can check that on your calculator. Might be helpful. And I have to multiply that quantity by -5. And it should be greater than or equal to 25 when I'm done. So a negative times a negative is going to be a positive. So I'm going to get positive 30. And that is indeed greater than 25. And remember, The number I chose was -3. It was less than or equal to -2. So my switched inequality sign tells me what number I choose to do the check, or what numbers are going to make the solution correct. But when I do a check, I have to do it in the original inequality. So let's real briefly go to your homework. So please turn to the next page. All right, for your homework, it says, for the following, you do not need to show the check. However, be sure to switch the inequality sign that's in the answer, in the solution, and do a mental check. So I will post the key after you're done so you can double check your work. Thanks so much, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.